Hello and welcome. Thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you this Wednesday evening. We are just going to wait a couple seconds to make sure that everyone has landed where they wanted to land for the breakout session, and we will get started. Hopefully you enjoyed Dr. Lynn's presentation as much as I did. All right, I already see some hearts going in the air. Sounds like there's some positive vibes on this Wednesday night. So we are going to go ahead and get started because I know that our time together will fly by. And so tonight, I'm very excited to be a part of the early spring STEM seminar with the Fresno County Office of Education. And tonight, our connection is going to be around building blocks of early learning. We're going to explore math with infants and toddlers, which is often a topic that doesn't get explored a lot. So with that, again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your Wednesday evening. And my name officially is Dr. Tabitha Thompson. I am part of the Early Learning Department in the Sacramento County Office of Education. And I always like to start with my why. And so as we spend the next 50 minutes or so together, I want to always be mindful that my passion is really around children and having them learn and grow into their own full potential, regardless of their age, their race, their ethnicity, their abilities, their varying income levels, or any of those other demographics. My why is just simply wanting kids to have those opportunities to learn and grow and explore everything that's out there for them to explore, including STEM. And so, with that, our big goal in the next, as we explore our time together, is really using your educator lens to explore those creative strategies that are supporting infants and toddlers with mathematical concepts. And through some very playful learning opportunities, you as participants hopefully will have a review of the developmental milestones for infants and toddlers, and then also examine the connection between brain development, mathematical concepts, learning, and then play, which we know is very important at those very early stages. We'll also explore creative and hands-on mathematical strategies and activities that can be engaging and creative for our infants and toddler age group. And so we think about mathematical concepts. We understand as educators that our brain is powerful. It has so many different areas and hemispheres that connect together. And so when we look at the brain and the anatomy of the brain, it really is where that star is, that lobe that activates those areas in our intraparietal sulcus that permits that processing, and that allows us to grasp those really basic math concepts even before our children are able to speak or count. So when we think about some math concepts, oftentimes as educators, we are not thinking maybe that math is connected in those early stages, but absolutely those very young brains are gearing toward being able to learn some of those more complex math concepts. And it is in that brain that they are ready to grasp some of those later concepts as they get to those TK and kindergarten years of their lives. So brain development, we know also during these infant and toddler stages is growing rapidly. We know that our kids are sponges at this age and can really relate to a lot of the things that we are attempting to teach them. And so we want to make sure that we continue to foster that early learning concepts of math. And I'm going to pause here to just remind us to just please use the Q&A feature if you do have any questions that come up for you. Also going to pause between sections of this presentation just to make sure that I connect with you in the chat. Please do feel free to throw your questions in the Q&A, and then I also make sure that I check the chat as we go along. So as educators, we always think about developmental milestones. What is it that our students are supposed to be learning as they are growing? And so when we think about our infants that are 0 to 6 months old, this is the stage in their lives where they're starting to show that interest in faces, especially familiar faces, and then objects that have very distinct features. So they're really laying the foundation for what later will become shape recognition. Also, during this stage, they're exploring objects through touch and manipulation. They love to put things in their mouth, and they're starting to learn about size and texture. Again, that will be very fundamental stages in math for later on in their learning. During the 0 to 6 month old stage, our infants are also starting to recognize familiar routines and patterns. So they will grow accustomed to bath time being at a particular time of the day. And then also they'll know very early on when feeding occurs. So those are some of the developmental milestones from 0 to 6 that are connected to mathematical concepts. And then as our infants get a little bit older in that 6 to 12 month old stage, they're starting to recognize really simple shapes like circles and squares. They're starting to understand the concept of more and less by comparing quantities of objects. So this, for instance, if you have a toddler who's looking at a familiar face like a mom or a dad or a grandmother, and there's those goldfish in their hands, and there's two on one side and there's a handful on the other side, chances are they are going to gear themselves toward that handful of goldfish because they understand that there's more in that hand than the other one. So this is starting to get them accustomed to comparing quantities of objects. And again, this can be as young as 6 months old to that 12-month-old range. They're also starting at this age to imitate actions like clapping or shaking a rattle, which is later on will be a process that they'll start to do early pattern recognition. They're also able at this age to start exploring containers by filling and emptying them. So this will be a very great activity for them to play with water and things like that as they're learning about exploring containers and quantities. As we get a little bit older, maybe into that toddler phase, that 12 to 18-month-old stage, our early toddlers are starting to be and recognize pointing to their body shapes when asked. So this is connected to early spatial awareness. They're also starting to recognize and say a few basic number words like 1, 2, 3. They're also starting to sort objects based on some similar attributes like colors or shapes. And they're engaging in some really simple counting activities. They can often count their toes or their fingers. This is the age group where they'll kind of start to show you their hands when you're asking about quantities. And so they are definitely starting to build a foundation for later mathematical concepts. As they get a tiny bit older into that 18 to 24-month-old age and stage, they're starting to identify geometric shapes, including circles, squares, and triangles. They're starting to understand the concept of bigger and smaller, and then they'll create some really simple patterns with objects. And typically these objects may be something familiar to them like toys or blocks that they're accustomed to playing with. They'll start to engage and pretend play with numbers, like feeding a baby 2 cookies as part of their daily play. And so here is a stage as they hit that 2-year-old mark where they are definitely starting to have some of those foundational math skills. As they get a tiny bit older into that 3-year-old range, they're really starting to recognize and name those basic shapes. Sometimes they're able to recognize and recite numbers up to 10, even if they don't fully understand their meaning. So this is more that rote count. They're using their hands to represent small quantities. So sometimes when you ask a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, how old are you? They will try and attempt to put up their fingers to show you exactly how many birthdays they've had. They're also starting to understand more simple comparison words like more or less. They're identifying, give me one more or one less as you start to engage with them through playful interactions. And they're grasping very basic concept of spatial awareness, like over or under. And so when you play playful games such as let's go under the table to find our bear, they are able to oftentimes do that at the stage of 2 to 3 years old. So as we think about mathematical concepts, again, oftentimes educators may not think that our infants and toddlers are engaged in those foundational math concepts. But as you can see here, and as listed in those developmental milestones, there are definitely some concepts at the very early age that they are starting to build a foundation with. So when we think about counting and shapes and comparison and spatial relationships and spatial awareness and sorting and classifying, measurement and patterns and quantities. These are absolutely some mathematical concepts that our youngest learners can really start to grasp even before they start their preschool age. I am going to pause here to check the chat to see if there is anything that I need to address before we move on to the next section. Someone said puzzles are big in my class. Absolutely. Our infants and toddlers absolutely love puzzles. Someone said, I never connected recognition of people and things with shapes and recognition later. That absolutely happens, especially as our infants and toddlers have those familiar faces, parents, caregivers, and things like that. They can start to see that a face can be a circle or an oval shape. Absolutely. So thank you for those comments. Again, just reminding you, if you have any questions that you want me to address, do feel free to throw it in the Q&A, and then I will address those as they come up. So as we move along and thinking about how all of our children, including infants and toddlers, learn, I threw this in there just for us to be mindful of what we call the pyramid model. So we know that learning only happens when all three of these tiers are a part of our learning environment. So thinking about building those positive relationships with our infants and toddlers and how those connections will ensure that they have not just the academic background, but then also that very healthy social emotional development. And then thinking about as educators, how are we creating those supportive environments, high quality environments that create the safety, not just the physical safety, but the mental safety for our infants and toddlers, as well as all of our students, to have that supportive environment to learn and play and grow. And then lastly, how are we making sure that we are using those effective teaching strategies to make sure that not just our mathematical concepts, but any of our academic concepts are actually grasped and retained, whether we are starting at the infancy level or we're connecting with older kids. So again, mindful as educators that we definitely want to make sure that we are doing our best in all three of these tiers so that our kids do not hit the top of the pyramid, which may require some extra support. So when thinking about learning and mathematical concepts in infants and toddlers, I want to introduce us or review for many of you the play continuum. And so as we think about play and play-based learning, and we understand as early educators that play is the vehicle to learning. We know that when we are creative and engaging for our students, and it is play-based, that is the best way for them to grasp concepts and then also to retain the information that we are teaching them. So when we look at this continuum, there are essentially three levels. The first level is that child self-determined play. And then we move to the right for the adult child collaborative play. And then we move to that far right, and it's adult planned and directed play. And so as we think about each of these, it is our hope that most of our day will be around what students are already engaged in and they are interested in so that they are directing their own learning. So the first part of the continuum is that child self-determined play. So this is where play is fun and engaging. It's voluntary. Kids are motivated because it's based on their capacities, it's based on their skills, and it's always based on their own interests. And so as we think about our daily schedules and maybe a group of students or a classroom of students that we are supporting, hopefully parts of your day do include a place and a space for your students to decide how they want to spend their time based solely on what they are interested in. And as adults during this time, we are observing, we're listening, we are always documenting, we're acknowledging our children and their strengths and the new learning that may be happening. And we're providing those supports to extend our children's interests and their skills. So again, this is hopefully if not most of your day, especially with our infants and toddlers, do hope that your schedule allows for at least part of our day to be that child self-determined play. And then as we move along the continuum, we then go in the middle, and that is the adult-child collaborative play. And this is where the big people and the little people share that responsibility for the meaning, the direction, the flow, and what are the outcomes connected to play. And so this could be that there's minimal guidance, there's moderate guidance, and there's that more intense guidance, depending on what exactly is the actual activity. And so, as we're thinking about math and connecting with infants and toddlers around mathematical concepts, we are always hopeful that some of our day will be that child self-determined play, but then there's an opportunity throughout the day for the big people and the little people, the children and the adults can be collaborative in what's going on for our students. We also want to be mindful during this phase of the continuum that there is and still a space for this play and learning to be around what students are interested in. What is it that they're naturally curious about? And then as we go to the far right of the continuum, there is an opportunity for adults to plan and direct play and learning. And so during this phase of the continuum, adults plan, initiate, and direct play and learning. The role of the kid for this part of the continuum is to simply follow along with directions. Maybe there's a space for them to practice specific concept skills and dispositions, and really, the instruction is aimed toward a predetermined outcome. And so while we want majority of their day to be self-guided based on their interests, we also know as educators that there might be a need for some part of the day to be adult plan and directed play. And so there has to be that healthy balance between all parts of the continuum. And so as you think about the groups of students that you are currently supporting, especially if it's infants and toddlers, the goal really is to make sure that there's a healthy blend along the continuum of all the different types of play. And so as we talk about play, we also are constantly reminded that play is learning and that that is absolutely the vehicle for how students engage with each other, engage in learning, and not only grasp concepts, but also retain the information that we are presenting to them. I am going to pause here to see if there is anything in the chat that I need to address, and then also any questions that have come up. Oh, you guys have some really great ideas. Geo boards are always very popular. I see someone said pegboards and the magnetiles. Oh my goodness, magnetiles are always fun for big people as well. Music for sure. The littles are stacking blocks and knocking them over. That's always fun to rebuild it. Pouring in and out of pots and pans. Sorting games are always important, especially that fine motor skills that happen with some of the sorting that can happen with the smaller objects are absolutely essential to mathematical concepts. Gardening, of course, especially when the weather is beautiful. We all love being outside. Absolutely. And then someone says, can 2-year-olds benefit from seeing the actual number? We're going to talk about that in just a little bit, how we engage our littles, our youngest learners with exploring math. And so if we think about mathematical concepts and we're wondering, how do we engage so that our youngest learners, again, we are talking about our youngest learners as young as 0 to 3, how do we engage them in math on a daily basis so that they start to grasp some of those concepts of counting and patterning and spatial awareness and spatial relationships. And so one of the things we want to always explore is playing. Are we playing those mathematical games and singing songs and reading books that use numbers and counting? And so to the person that asked in the chat about, is it beneficial for a 2-year-old to see a number? Why not? It's not harmful. And so as you're reading books and showing them the pages and they're exploring the art in books, it's not harmful to show them the number 2 as you're singing it or saying it, because some of what will happen as they grow into the later mathematical concepts is the rote counting, where they're just counting along because they've heard the song a million times. They may not understand the actual meaning of the number 2, but they've heard it. They can then show you on their fingers, and then they're starting to count objects. So it's absolutely beneficial for them to start to see numbers in books, and then also in their real world atmosphere. So definitely beneficial for them to start to see numbers. And then we think about counting. So as we are going along our day and we are counting lunch as we put it out, or the shoes as we tie shoes, or fingers as we're clapping, absolutely making sure that we are counting out loud so that our children hear us. And we're counting toys and anything else in our environments that our kids can relate to. Because again, they will start with the rote counting, just singing along with you before they actually know what the value of a number is. And then we're exploring objects with different sizes and shapes. So if it is a toy, if it's outdoor equipment, if it's the size of their shoes as you're comparing it, if it's the size of their hands, all of those are ways in which to explore different sizes in a very everyday kind of atmosphere for things that they're familiar with. So again, we are hoping that the real life connections will help them to grasp that concept mathematically, that many things, including some of their toys, are the same objects, but they may be a different shape. And so that is an excellent lesson for them to learn with real life objects. And then we're constantly talking to our littles about math. And so as you are going about your day and you're talking to students, again, they can be as young as 0 to 3, describing in mathematical terms what your kids are seeing and doing. So again, as you're putting out 3 milks for the lunchtime, or you are counting 3 blocks for them to build something, talking to them and counting and constantly talking about math will really set them up for a very strong mathematical foundation as they get into their preschool and later years. The other thing to think about as you're exploring math with this very young age is sorting toys by size, color, or what they do. So if you think about a dramatic play area or a block area, is there the ability for even a 2-year-old to be able to show you some yellow blocks, even if they don't necessarily know the color yellow, the big blocks versus the little blocks, or what do the different blocks do? So some of you may have the soft, foamy blocks or your wooden blocks, and can they sort those without even knowing anything about what types of blocks they are, or the name of the blocks, but they can absolutely sort based on a soft block versus a hard block. And so again, thinking about some of those later concepts that will happen for them in preschool and TK and kinder, the ability to sort is absolutely something that they can start to grasp at that very young age. And then we're starting as educators to really build those early math skills into routines. So as we think about our daily routines and their daily routines, there are some things that naturally happen at certain times of the day that they will grow accustomed to. So they know when they eat, they know when there's potentially a diaper change that's happening, they know about car rides. And so those routines will start to also filter into their understanding and concepts of time. They know when they eat because those little tummies growl. They know when mommy and daddy comes in the car ride home. And so again, thinking about how to describe in very kid-friendly terms and infant toddler terms what routines mean in terms of mathematical concepts. So we can absolutely start those lessons very early on. And then we're constantly asking questions to make sure that we're continuing to explore math. So whether it's hop on the circle outside, or it's jump on the red shape, or how many leaves do you see, or bring me a handful of leaves, or how many rocks do I have in each hand, which hand has more, which has less, or point to which one do you want. And when they say that they want the one with more, you verbally say the word more. That's how our kids are starting to understand our mathematical concepts at this young age. And then lastly, as we think about exploring math concepts with infants and toddlers, we're really thinking about what are the age appropriate materials that we're providing to support those explorations. Are we providing in all areas of our classrooms or in our different settings? Are we providing those materials that will engage them in math that is fun, that is engaging, and that they can actually explore on their own? So whether it is blocks or different toys, the books that we're using for our library and our reading areas, are they talking about math? Are they showing those numbers? The songs that we're singing, the music that we're playing, the movements that we're doing, are those all age appropriate so that they can start to, again, build those really strong mathematical foundations? So, some of the ways in which we can, again, continue that exploration, especially for infants and toddlers, is to think about how we are providing those sensory structured play. Again, some of it can be that adult directed and planned, some of it can be that child self determined play, but how are we making sure that there's sensory in there? And this can be through expressive art. So we know that our kids is the younger age love Play-Doh, they love paint, they love loose objects and parts that they can just kind of fiddle around with. Is there active play in which math can be a part of it, whether it is counting how many times we hop, how many times we can go up and down a slide, um, how many steps we take between our seat and the large circle area. All of those are ways in which we can also incorporate movement into our lessons so that not only are they grasping and starting to grasp some of those mathematical concepts related to counting and sorting, things like that, but they're also getting movement as a part of the lesson. We probably all will agree that at this age, our kids love to be outdoors, especially if the weather is beautiful. And so, how are we taking some of the things that we have in the classroom outside of the classroom, and how are we making sure that our outdoor area is also a learning environment? So whether it is bringing things from inside of the classroom or how you have your outdoor area set up, just be mindful that a lot of math also happens outdoors, and so we don't necessarily have to be in a classroom um, for mathematical concepts to be developed and explored. We can absolutely explore those outside as well. And then think about your writing and reading areas. Are we having them explore books that talk about math and counting? And are there opportunities for them to listen to toys or things like that that actually count and have those mathematical concepts already embedded in them? I know as a site administrator, dramatic play was always the most visited area of the classroom. That was where our kids did a lot of learning. And so as you think about those age appropriate materials for the dramatic play area, are you building in maybe some money and coins? They don't know the value of them yet, but that is again another way to introduce some of those mathematical concepts around money. Maybe there's a timer in the dramatic play area where you can start, or a clock where you can start to introduce some things around time, and just talking to them about time, even though they may not understand it yet. There are still the conversations that can be had. And definitely imaginary play. So, again, our students will, even if they don't understand counting, when they have had that repetitive counting and the songs that they kind of sing along to, they will start to do that as part of their imaginary play. And then definitely, someone already mentioned it, puzzles. Puzzles are a great way, especially puzzles that engage them with some of those fine motor skills, are definitely a way in which we can incorporate some of those mathematical skills. So before we go here, let me do one last check of the chat. Math is everywhere. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And someone reminded us about the indoor environment as well as the outdoor, to build that curiosity around nature and engagement and socialization with other children in their school setting. Absolutely. It is everywhere. Someone said you mentioned loose parts. Did you mean that loose parts are a safety hazard for children this age? So loose parts, if you have been through, and I can't think of her name right now, she is the mastermind behind loose parts, meaning those recycled things that we can bring from home, things like that. When we mention loose parts, it is anything outside of a toy. So not the manufactured toy. So it can be toilet paper rolls. It can be um, in anything that you can think of that's not a manufactured toy, is what we consider kind of those loose parts that you don't have to actually go and buy. And again, those can be used for sorting, they can be used for counting, patterning, any of those sorts of things. So not necessarily loose parts that pose a choking hazard. Absolutely not. So thank you for that clarification. And so as we think about math, and again, mathematical concepts as it relates to this age group, I wanted to play this really cute video that just reminds us about learning and playing and how they are very much intertwined. And so I know that as early educators, we are often fighting against the myth that play is not learning, and many people outside of our field question whether or not play should be a part of our daily routines. And so this is just a fun video of some kids that are explaining to us what play is.
Play is fun. Play feels like unicorn poop. Play looks like happiness. Play feels like feels like beautiful air. Play feels like joy. Play looks like having fun. It doesn't really smell like anything. Play feels like farting. Play feels like drinking juice. Play tastes like my tongue going numb.
Hey y'all. We're Key, Harper, and Tran.
Play is fun. Play feels like unicorn poop. Play looks like happiness. Play feels like feels like beautiful air. Play feels like joy. Play looks like having fun. It doesn't really smell like anything. Play feels like farting. Play feels like drinking juice. Play tastes like my tongue going numb.
Hi, Tabitha. I hate to interrupt, but it sounds like something's going on with your audio. We can't hear you speaking. We can see your mouth moving, but can't hear you. Can you check your audio really quick? And then you'll have to start back up from where you started after the video.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Okay, I don't know what happened with that one. There we go. Okay, I see some thumbs up. I'm sorry about that. I didn't touch anything. But what I want to share as we start to round out our time together is an article called "Is Play a Right or a Privilege?" And although it is from 2017, it is still very much relevant. And so again, you'll have access to it. And so essentially, it reminds us as educators that play continues to be an equity issue. We think about our kids coming from varying backgrounds and wanting to make sure that we continue to emphasize that, especially at this younger age, play is the vehicle for learning and that our kids have a right to play. And so every chance we get, we should be promoting those play-based experiences for them to continue to grow and learn. So as early educators and as supporters of our young, I'm sure that maybe preaching to the choir with that one, but again, it's an article that I love to share because it continues to remind us that our students absolutely need those opportunities to extend their own interests and to be the masterminds behind their own learning. And so as we think about STEAM and the notion that our kids should have those opportunities to explore the varying careers that they could have in the future, we absolutely want to make sure that their learning is engaging and creative and that they are getting everything that they need in a fun and playful way, especially in our early education settings. The other resources I want to share, I've listed them here. I'm not going to click on them for the sake of time, but there are some resources that I pinned here just related to math talk as it relates to infants and toddlers, how we again want to continue to do lots of math talk. Reading and singing around math. It really is never too early to start talking about math. Again, those little brains are starting to develop, and I just want to make sure that from the very early onset, math is a part of what we're doing as part of our daily routines with our youngest learners. A couple of my favorite books I wanted to show you here. Again, if you are interested in those books that specifically focus on some of our math concepts, here's a couple that are very easy on the eyes. They have wonderful, beautiful artwork in them, so that will be engaging for the students. And again, this is just two that I picked up out of many math books that are out there for infants and toddlers, but I did want to share two of my favorite with you. And then I want to go back for our reflective piece. Thinking about just kind of the ideas that were presented, is there any of those that are most impactful for you? Things that maybe you're thinking, oh, yes, I could absolutely incorporate this into my daily routine, or maybe I hadn't thought of math in this way for infants and toddlers. And then are there other ideas that we should, as educators, explore? Specific activities that maybe you have already done for infants and toddlers that, again, connect those mathematical concepts at that very early age. So I'd love for you to throw it in the chat if you do anything specific with your infants and toddlers that you would like to share with the group. Reading and singing numbers. Oh, someone else has fish eyes as their favorite. Number songs, jumping outside, singing, and a lot of talking and describing. Absolutely, that self-mapping and that self-talk. Never thought about math this way. So grateful for your great ideas. Thank you, Elizabeth. Asking those open-ended questions, singing. I always love this age group because I'm not a singer, but they never knew that. I just love to try and sing, and they were always still appreciative. The yoga counting, absolutely. And yoga, let's be mindful that also helps with some of our self-regulation skills for our little ones. Singing and comparing shapes to objects, including math in everyday, making up songs, movement, listening to music. Same, not a singer, but I love to sing. running and singing and gardening, to do predictions. Absolutely. Dancing, of course. Singing, music, movement, brainstorming. And how wonderful to brainstorm a chart, as you think about predictions in gardening. What will grow here? How fast will it grow? Singing and reading music. So lots of really great cutting plastic fruit, going from one whole piece to more pieces. And that's that concept of possibly more or less. Absolutely. Gardening, picking leaves. Our kiddos love all the outdoors, the rocks and the sticks and the ladybugs, all of those things we can count and we can describe and we can compare numbers of how many we found and their shapes and their colors. Nature walks, absolute bubbles. Yes, we love counting bubbles. Planting, absolutely. You guys have some really great ideas. Thank you for those. And so as we round out our time, I will, and Heather will help me see if there's any questions that I can answer. Singing Five Little Monkeys, baking and cooking. Any questions that I can answer as it relates to math? Valentina has a question. She says, our center serves high school age moms and their 0 to 3 children. We have them for such a short time. How can we maximize the brief time to get them ready for their next success? And I'm going to assume that you're saying a brief time, meaning like a shorter day, a couple of hours a day, maybe, or time in terms of like you only have them for a couple weeks. Either way, any of those, any time that you spend, and this is not just necessarily related to math, but any time that you spend connecting our kids to not just academics, because I love academics, but I actually love social emotional development even more. So any chance that you get to promote and encourage our kids to be able to self-regulate, to be able to own their own feelings and be expressive, and those sorts of things that are connected to social skills are a really great benefit and a way to definitely maximize your time with them. 0 to 3, I know there's lots of pressures to have it be academic focused, but really understand that if we can get our kids to a place and a space where social emotional is really the goal, I think later on they will be very, very ready for all of those academic skills that are going to come their way. So long answer short is if you have just a brief time, for sure you can talk about math in all of the different ways that we just talked about. But if there's a necessary focus, it would definitely be on that social emotional development for our 0 to 3. So how do they share together? How do they play with their peers? How do they take turns and be patient and problem solve when those issues come up? If there's only one toy and that's the toy that they want, how do we teach them those kinds of skills at that very tender age of 0 to 3? And then Erica says, how would I teach math to infants? And so if you think about the slide I shared that had the 0 to 6, in fact, I can go back to it. It had the developmental milestones for 0 to 6. And even though we don't necessarily think of math at that very young age, their brains are actually gearing up for mathematical skills even at that very young age. And so at 0 to 6, they're starting to be able to recognize and explore objects through their touch. So they're just starting those very basic skills to learn about size and texture. And then at that very young age of 0 to 6 months, they're also starting to learn that later on there's a thing called timing. And so within their familiar routines and patterns, they'll start to grasp the concept of things like feeding time and bath time and car time and those sorts of things. So those familiar faces will later on resemble shapes. And so at that very young age, you can still start to lay the foundation for mathematical concepts that they will later on grasp and retain. And so it is absolutely never too early to talk about math. And so as you're thinking about the younger learners that you are probably supporting, think about how to always continue to talk about math, whether you are singing um, songs that count, whether you are showing them books that show the actual numbers, whether you are talking to them about whether they want more or less, or showing them, like someone mentioned, a plastic fruit that you can go from a whole part to pieces. All of those are going to be really great math concepts. And I think I've seen one more question. Sorry to give you. I think I've seen one more question that was in the. How do we apply mathematicals for children with disabilities? And so keeping in mind that our students will learn at their own pace. And so some of them will need additional support depending on what their disability might be. And so depending on that is how you would gear some of your math learning. If there are students who need maybe some tactile type things, some sensory things, they may not be able to, the concept might not be about um, you verbally singing songs to them. Maybe they actually have to put the objects in their hands and they can count, or you can count until they understand the concepts of counting. But definitely, you still, even if our students have disabilities or they need another level of support, you still do want to do those everyday math talks and constantly be talking about math, because even with a varying level of ability, our kids can still absolutely grasp these math concepts. It might not be along the same developmental milestones that were suggested here. It may be a little bit delayed. However, they still will be able to grasp some of those concepts. So we still do want to push for math talk every day, all day, and as early as possible, even if our students require a different level of support. And then Stephanie says, how to teach counting and for children to recognize quantity when they have speech and cognitive delays. So much like I just mentioned, it may not be on that same developmental milestone timetable, but you would still gear it toward what they're capable of, and always, again, pushing our kids to continue to learn and grow. And so it may be that you continue to just sing, 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 or they may need some objects in their hands to be able to actually count. And eventually they will get there. Our goal is definitely to continue to teach and provide that support for students wherever they are. And so sometimes the speech delays may cause a little bit of a delay in some of the math concepts, but again, our students will at some point, typically they will grasp exactly what they need in terms of math. So that is the last question that I see here. Again, I appreciate and thank you for spending part of your Wednesday evening with me. And I hope you also enjoy Dr. Lynn as our keynote speaker. Encourage you to just be mindful that it is never too early to start talking about math, and keep talking about math so that our kids absolutely fall in love with math and continue to fall in love with math, and they become little mathematicians. So again, thank you on behalf of Sacramento County Office of Education, who I am a part of. I appreciate you guys spending some time with me this evening. Have a great rest of your evening.